United Nations Environment Program. I know we're at the tail end of the stock taking, but we're going to give you a lively and energetic discussion for this high-level session. So please, and we will make time to engage with the audience. I know that's been an issue in some other sessions, but we are going to really time. So get ready to be part of the discussion. That's what we see this as. So the only other administrative note is that when we have a keynote that will be given in Portuguese, and the translation will be done in real time up on the stage. So you don't need to use your headphones. You will actually hear it in the main microphone system. So with that, let's get started. So at UNEP, women's transformation is a powerful lever to advance all the Rio Conventions, the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and of course, many, many SDGs. And that's what this session is about. How do we use climate finance to leverage not only food systems transformation, but also some of the other co-benefits for the environment? As we all know, food's climate finance must urgently support resilient, sustainable agricultural food systems amid worsening climate impacts. I've been in a lot of sessions, and I think you've all heard the same statistics I have about the impacts of climate change on food systems. But I also think you probably heard the statistics that agri-food systems have the potential to mitigate up to 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions. Yet, currently, they only receive 7.2% of climate finance. Smallholder farmers, which we've heard a lot about in the last few days, the last day actually, smallholder farmers, if they only receive 1.1% of adaptation financing. So this is something that we need to shift, and that is the point of this session, to have a discussion about how do we make those shifts, how do we leverage climate finance for food system transformation in a systemic way. So you don't want to hear me, you want to hear this wonderful panel. So with that, I would love to invite up His Excellency, the Minister for Social Development and Fight Against Hunger in Brazil. His Excellency is Brazil's Minister for Development and Social Assistance, Family, and the Fight Against Hunger. He's a member of the Workers' Party. He's had a long political career, beginning as a city councilor in 1992, and later serving as a federal deputy, 4-term governor, and senator. So we look forward to hearing your comments. Please. Please, Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Boa tarde, eu quero saudar a Maria Robson, em nome dela, saudar toda a mesa, saudar que todas as autoridades aqui presentes. Excelências, representantes de governos e organismos internacionais, da sociedade civil e do setor privado, demais participantes.
I would like to greet everybody in the panel this morning, this afternoon, and also I'd like to thank everybody here involved. So, Excellencies, representatives of government, international organizations, civil society, and the private sector, dear participants, it is an honor to address all of you in such a representative panel.
É uma honra poder dirigir-me a todos e a todas neste painel tão representativo.
So again, I would like to thank everybody, and it's an honor again to address everybody here. Thank you.
O relatório da Aliança Global para o Futuro da Alimentação mostra a lacuna do financiamento climático para sistemas alimentares, onde menos de 3% do financiamento climático está atribuído aos sistemas alimentares. Ao mesmo tempo, a segurança alimentar e sistemas agroalimentares foram as áreas mais afetadas por riscos climáticos.
The report by the Global Alliance for the Future of Food reveals a major gap in climate Less than 3% of climate finance is allocated to food systems, even though food security and agri-food systems are among the sectors most affected by climate risks.
O cenário que vemos hoje é de financiamento fragmentado e cada vez menor. Anúncios de corte nos programas e orçamentos de ajuda oficial ao desenvolvimento se multiplicam. Os desafios seguem cada vez maiores, mas os meios de enfrentá-los estão minguando. Dessa forma, é urgente e necessário buscar sinergias entre os fundos existentes.
Today's scenario is one of increasingly fragmented and shrinking financial flows. Announcements of cuts to official development assistance programs and budgets are multiplying. The challenges keep growing, but the means to address them are shrinking. This makes it urgent synergies among existing funds.
A Aliança Global contra a Fome e a Pobreza foi criada justamente para apoiar os países a mobilizar e alinhar recursos em torno de políticas que funcionam, lideradas pelos próprios governos nacionais.
The Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty was created precisely to support countries in mobilizing and aligning resources around policies that work, led by national governments themselves.
Hoje, a Aliança Global reúne 193 membros, incluindo 101 países e 92 organismos internacionais, bancos de desenvolvimento, instituições financeiras e organizações da sociedade civil.
Today, the Global Alliance gathers 193 members, including 101 countries and 92 international organizations, development banks, financial institutions, and civil society organizations.
O que torna essa iniciativa única é o seu foco na implementação. A aliança não cria planos do zero. Ela atua para destravar o potencial de estratégias, planos, metas e políticas que já existem, que são eficazes, escaláveis e alinhadas às prioridades locais, mas que muitas vezes esbarram na fragmentação ou insuficiência dos recursos disponíveis.
What makes this initiative unique is its focus on implementation. The Alliance does not create new plans from scratch. It aims to unlock the potential of existing strategies, plans, goals, and policies that are effective, scalable, and aligned with local priorities, but often face fragmentation or lack of sufficient funding.
Saber a cesta de políticas da Aliança foi criada justamente para isso. O que os países precisam agora é de financiamento previsível e coordenado para implementar essas soluções em escala, e a Aliança Global é uma ferramenta concreta para ajudar nisso, unindo políticas públicas e financiamento e parcerias em favor de quem mais precisa.
We know what works. The Alliance's policy basket was designed for the very purpose. What countries now need is predictable and coordinated financing to implement these solutions at scale. The Global Alliance is a concrete tool to support this, uniting public policies, financing, and partnerships for those who need it most.
A Aliança já está apoiando países na elaboração de planos de implementação de programas contra a fome e a pobreza no âmbito de processo chamado Iniciativa de Aceleração, Fast Track. 13 países participam nessa primeira etapa dessa iniciativa, promovendo a inclusão produtiva rural na Etiópia, por exemplo, Ruanda, República Dominicana, voltado à proteção social, à primeira infância na Palestina e Tanzânia, e transferência de renda na Zâmbia e Haiti, para citar alguns exemplos.
The Alliance is already supporting countries in developing implementation plans for anti-hunger and anti-poverty programs through a process known as the Fast Track Initiative. 13 countries are participating, promoting rural productive inclusion in Ethiopia, Rwanda, and the Dominican Republic, early childhood social protection in Palestine and Tanzania, and cash transfer programs in Zambia and Haiti, among others.
A adesão recente do Fundo Verde para o Clima à Aliança Global é um marco estratégico, pois reforça a necessidade de unir esforços e fundos que integrem o social e o ambiental. O financiamento climático é essencial para assegurar recursos para programas que contribuam para a adaptação climática e, ao mesmo tempo, para a redução da fome e da pobreza nos países.
The recent accession of the Green Climate Fund to the Global Alliance is both a symbolic and strategic milestone as it reinforces the need to bring together social and environmental financing. Climate finance is essential to ensuring resources for programs that contribute both to climate adaptation and to the reduction of hunger and poverty in developing countries.
Em nome do presidente Lula, faço um convite a vocês para a COP30, em Belém, no meu país. Lá iremos tratar por uma declaração de líderes de como a luta contra a mudança do clima também é a luta contra a fome e a pobreza, pois quem mais sente o impacto do clima são os mais vulneráveis.
On behalf of our President Lula, I would like to take this opportunity to invite you all to the COP30 in Belém, in my country. There, we will adopt a leaders' declaration on how to fight against the climate change.
É apenas se investirmos pesadamente nos mais vulneráveis, podemos criarmos resiliência de verdade para os pequenos que produzem nosso alimento. E apenas casando o social, o ambiental e o econômico, apenas assim, a luta contra a mudança do clima será também uma luta justa.
There we will adopt a leaders' declaration on how the fight against climate change is also a fight against hunger and poverty, because those who suffer most from climate impacts are the most vulnerable. Only by investing heavily in the most vulnerable, by building true resilience for the small-scale producers who grow our food, and by integrating social, environmental, and economic dimensions can the fight against climate change also be.
Não é mais possível buscar soluções sustentáveis que negligenciem as pessoas, combinar os habitantes de famílias já integradas no meio ambiente com as necessidades econômicas de manejo sustentável da natureza é uma forma promissora de inclusão socioeconômica.
It is no longer acceptable to pursue sustainable solutions that neglect people. Combining the knowledge and skill of families already integrated with their ecosystems, with the economic needs and sustainable nature management is a promising pathway to socio-economical inclusion.
A geração de empregos verdes é indispensável para que a força de trabalho local viva dignamente com o devido respeito à natureza, retroalimentando esse círculo virtuoso.
Green jobs provide the income necessary for local communities to live in harmony with nature, creating a virtuous cycle.
No Brasil, temos celebrado parcerias para projetos de agrofloresta produtiva e mapeamos áreas degradadas, fazemos a recuperação do solo e a extração, por exemplo, de castanhas e frutos, insumos para fármacos e cosméticos.
In Brazil, we have been promoting partnerships for productive agroforestry projects. We map degraded areas, restore the soil, and support the harvesting of nuts and fruits, as well as inputs for pharmaceuticals and cosmetics.
Além de repor a vegetação, conseguimos uma floresta integrada às necessidades da população local. Com isso, valorizamos a diversidade do nosso ecossistema e a recuperação do solo, em que garantimos renda digna para essas famílias.
In doing so, we restore vegetation and integrate forests with the needs of local populations. We promoted biodiversity, regenerate ecosystems, and ensure decent livelihoods for local families.
Estamos trabalhando a todo vapor com o programa Acredita, uma iniciativa ampla de inclusão socioeconômica voltada à qualificação profissional, vagas de emprego e acesso a crédito para empreendedores de baixa renda.
We are also in full motion with the Acredita program, a broad initiative for socioeconomic inclusion, job opportunities, and access to credit for low-income entrepreneurs.
Lançado no ano passado, o programa Acredita já está mostrando a que veio. É um grande estímulo para romper o ciclo de pobreza, crise e proporcionar oportunidades reais para as pessoas de baixa renda.
Launched last year, Acredita is already showing results. It is a strong driver to break the cycle of poverty, foster resilience, and offer real opportunities to low-income population.
Queremos levar ao mundo nossos esforços nacionais e soluções nestas áreas, assim como convidar outros atores a mostrar seus esforços para promover uma ação global coordenada.
We want to bring our national efforts and solutions to the global stage, and we invite other actors to showcase their efforts so we may promote globally coordinated action.
Temos exemplos muito bons como o marco de referência de sistemas alimentares e clima para as políticas públicas, para a organização dos sistemas alimentares em relação às mudanças climáticas, que tem o objetivo de fortalecer a segurança alimentar e nutricional por meio de uma transição justa.
We have excellent examples like the reference framework on food systems and climate for public policies, which supports food system planning in the context of climate change, aiming to strengthen food and nutrition security through a just transition.
Este marco propõe meios e estratégias para regenerar, adaptar e transformar esses sistemas frente aos desafios climáticos atuais e futuros. O marco apresenta como princípios o direito humano à alimentação adequada, à soberania alimentar, à justiça climática, à sustentabilidade de todas as dimensões, a abordagens sistêmicas e ação conjunta entre governo, centrais e locais.
This framework proposes ways and strategies to regenerate in the face of current and future climate changes. Its guiding principles include the human right to adequate food, food sovereignty, climate justice, sustainability in all dimensions, system approaches, and joint action between national and local governments.
Concluo dizendo, temos uma missão desafiadora à frente. Com tantos cortes e tantos desafios, não podemos mais nos dar ao luxo de dispensar um único dólar com atividades redundantes, fragmentadas, sem impacto.
I would like to conclude by saying we have a major challenge ahead. With so many cuts and so many crises, we know we can no longer afford to waste a single dollar on ineffective activities.
É preciso unir esforços. O financiamento climático não é apenas uma necessidade técnica, é uma escolha política. É a decisão de investir em um futuro em que ninguém passe fome, pobreza e desigualdade.
We must join forces. Climate finance is not just a technical necessity, it is a political choice. It is the decision to invest in a future where no one faces hunger, poverty, or inequality.
Assistirei com muito interesse aos debates e desejo a todos um excelente painel. Contem com o Brasil, contem com a Aliança Global contra a Fome e a Pobreza. Muito obrigado.
I look forward to our discussions and wish everyone an excellent panel, and also for our future. I would like to thank everybody as well, and we'll work together to fight poverty. Thank you very much.
Desculpem, mas não falo inglês.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. Thank you for Brazil's leadership in the COP, but also thank you for giving us a real tangible example of the kind of alliances, kinds of multi-stakeholder relationships that we can bring together for meaningful action for climate, for food, for nature, for jobs, and for many other benefits and dividends. So that is a perfect setup for this esteemed panel up here. I'm going to introduce the panel and then we'll jump right into it. I have a list of amazing bios from this group of people. I'm going to truncate them so we can get into the discussion, but I'm sure I won't do my introduction, so my apologies for that. First, we have Professor Chawa, who is the Secretary General in the Ministry of Environment and Nature Protection and Sustainable Development in Cameroon. And he's also the coordinator of the Network of Excellence in Land Governance for Central Africa. He has worked in a number of areas and published in a number of areas ranging from landscape dynamics, natural resource management, adaptation to climate change, land governance, natural hazards, and I think I can go on and on. So thank you. Next to me, I have Ruth Davies, who is serving as a special representative for nature for the United Kingdom. And Ruth has quite an impressive bio here. She's been the Deputy Director for Policy and Advocacy at the Royal Society for Protection of Birds, but she's served many roles advising the government in many different aspects of climate and nature. Over here, I don't have them in order, so we have, I have Dr. Olo is the Executive Secretary at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia. Ms. Dashti is the leading economist and a long-term champion for women's rights, gender equality, and democratic reform. She has also a very deep background, particularly in planning, research, and development, and she has worked for major national, international, financial, and development institutions. Thank you. Then right here, I have Philip Mill, who's the director of Africa 2 Directorate, covering Central, East, and Southern Africa and the African Union. At the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ. He's worked also previously, he headed divisions in South Asia for climate policy at BMZ. And then last but not least, I have Peter Backer on the very end, our distinguished business leader. He's led the world and is leading the World Business Council for Sustainable Development as president and CEO. Previously, he's worked in global transport, postal and logistics company, and he was named Time Magazine as one of the top 100 climate leaders in business. So thank you for that. So with that, this is the panel, and I think we're going to jump right into the discussion. And as I said, we want to make this very interactive, so there won't be a lot. We're going to be turning to the audience very, very quickly. So let me go first to my questions. And my first question, I think I'm going to ask through Dr. Chawa. That's okay. We just heard a story from Brazil, but now we'd like to turn to Cameroon. And can you tell me how climate finance contributes to food system transformation, specifically looking at halting deforestation and other co-benefits through agroforestry systems? What's been your experience in Cameroon?
Thank you very much. I will start, let me put it in French.
Yeah.
Rather. Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you very much for this question. I would like to start. The agricultural and livestock sector has been identified as the most vulnerable to climate change in our country. It is therefore at the very heart of the strategy, our development strategy, and it is also the sector that is facing the most, is bearing the brunt of desertification. So it is up to us to find financing. There are ongoing reforms, the first being a legal text that has been drafted to reorganize the climate agenda. Within this text, Cameroon has produced its national climate plan, and there is a chapter 6 to be specific, that is consecrated to finance mechanisms. Given that the in agriculture and livestock farming, our goal is to find out financing within this sector can be promoted. And this has been divided into long-term and short-term. For example, analyzing risk. We have also identified, and this is specific to climate-sensitive projects. We have identified them. And given the review of the legal framework, which was decreed in 1996 and is currently being revised, we have taken this opportunity to include all climate-related issues, including climate financing. Another opportunity that has been opened to us is the review of the National Climate Plan. There's a $3 million fund, and we believe that as we review the program, we should mobilize all stakeholders, including the private sector, for us to move together and better support our sector at the domestic level, all initiatives that have to do with food systems. Very quickly, allow me to identify the BioFin initiative. This is a biodiversity initiative that is promoted and supported by UNEP.
De mécanismes de financement de la diversité biologique,
in the CBD Montreal framework. And a very important initiative is seen in our willingness in supporting our national structures to have direct access to financing. We have two examples for this. The one is the autonomous fund, and this is directly accredited to the Green Fund. This has already started. The process is ongoing. And then there is a common bank that is known in our country as FECOM that has been accredited to the Adaptation Fund. I think that these two examples show you that we are working on the ground. For now, I would like to share with you these examples to show you that we are concretely working. We are working on the ground, aware that this sector is very important, yet vulnerable. We have taken initiatives and we continue to work to ensure that the sector benefits from necessary review.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn to Ruth now and ask Ruth, and I know Ruth is always very practical in her answers, so in really practical ways, how can financial institutions and development partners align climate finance between nature and food and ensure measurable co-benefits? And a bit of what are the real enablers to make that happen and work? Oh, you're far enough away.
Thanks very much. I'm always so far away because I'm so small that I can't reach the microphone properly. Thank you, but thank you, Minister. That's very kind of you. I hope you can all hear me. And I'll try and rise to the challenge of being practical. I think it is really important at the beginning of the conversation, though, for me particularly and for all of us to remember to say thank you specifically to our Brazilian colleagues, because I think Minister Diaz represented very well the to do something difficult, which is for the together under an umbrella that recognizes that action on climate and action for nature needs to deliver against goals for people, and it needs to deliver against goals on hunger and poverty in a really integrated way. So there's something about us recognizing that that's quite a unique moment at COP30 and being able to lean in behind the efforts that our Brazilian colleagues are making that really matters. I'm also aware there's a lot of other work going behind the scenes at COP30, some of which I would like to sort of foreground, which I think is the kind of foundation stones for this practical approach. We're trying to unlock finance. We need to make sure we have the evidence base that really supports synergies. So we can't simply make claims and assumptions that it is the right thing to do to work in a synergistic way, to assume that climate and nature finance and food systems work all stacks up together. We've got to be able to evidence that by being able to talk in a concrete way about the fact that food systems are absolutely at the forefront of climate impacts. To be really clear about the fact that nature and nature-based solutions and natural resources, including forests, wetlands, water, soils, underpin the future productivity of the agriculture system and are completely vital to ensuring that that system can support people's lives and livelihoods in future. And I think we also have to be absolutely concrete about the fact that the role of smallholder farmers and family farms and of SMEs in the agriculture sector is hugely underrepresented, not visible sufficiently in the climate system. So there's something about actually being able to talk about them as solutions givers and demonstrating the solutions that they're bringing to the table, which means that we've got the evidence base that I think makes it unanswerable that we should be massively increasing the amount of finance that we're directing towards food and food systems. Once you've developed an evidence base, you also need a rational set of metrics. And as it stands at the moment, anybody who is working in the space that we're working in is probably facing, I mean, I could name immediately on the fingers of one hand, at least, 5 different systems of metrics that are measuring different things in different places to try to deliver outcomes in this space. There are different metrics under the UNCCD, under the UNCBD, under the UNFCCC. There are different metrics around Food System Summit, and there are different metrics around poverty and nutrition. This is very, very difficult if what you're actually trying to do is secure a synergistic agenda. And at some point, we have to make it easier for people in both the public and private sector to be able to measure the outcomes we want in a relatively simple and straightforward way. That is not a academic point. If you are a private sector player trying to think about how you align your investments against this range of issues, that is almost impossible to do if you're in a situation where there are so many different things for you to count that you simply cannot persuade your boardroom that this is a possible and sensible thing for you to be doing. So it's a very practical measure that I wanted to put forward. I think we're also beginning to see a move towards much more synergistic national planning. Again, if you're a national government right now, you're probably being asked to produce a plan for each of those conventions. All of them overlap with each other. You're producing adaptation plans, you're producing food systems plans. Can we find a way collectively to make it much less of a bureaucratic burden for individual governments who are wanting to engage with this, to be able to develop an integrated plan, which is driven by their own priorities that they have identified? It shouldn't be so difficult to do because it just seems to speak to a principle here too, that successful investments are always going to be driven by the national priorities of countries, and they're also going to link back to what people actually need to support better lives and livelihoods. So I think those are some practical suggestions to get the framework right before we start thinking about how to unlock the finance. And those are the keys to the treasure house, so to speak. But I think we should probably also, very importantly, take on some responsibility ourselves in the way that we engage with the global system. At some point, we have to be able to make sure that if we're talking about climate finance, we're talking about the roadmaps associated with that, we're having a very visible conversation about what the scale of the gap is. At every point in that conversation, we make it clear and visible that there is a large gap which is focused on and needs to be filled around food systems and around that money actually reaching smallholders and SMEs on the ground. And then the final point, which I think has been talked about by many people across the course of the last 2 days, is we know that we're in a complex financing environment where there's pressure. And we also know that what people really, really want to access is long-term, sustainable, sensible private capital to be able to build their food systems in the way that they would like. What is it that we can do with all of our instruments brought together to be able to increase the appetite for risk or de-risk the investments of the private sector in a context where those people who are working on the ground, who are the solutions providers, who are the smallholders, who are the family farmers, who are the SMEs, are able to access credit and finance in a way that is suitable for them in their context over the long term. And that isn't a practical solution necessarily I'm putting forward, but I want to make sure that I've given myself that homework and all of us that homework to go away with, because it's probably the single most important question that's arisen in the last two or 3 days. Thank you.
Thank you. The importance of evidence-based and accountability frameworks, simplification and sense, which is easier to say than actually do, and then de-risking, good enabling factors for unlocking finance. But I think I'll turn next to Dr. Dashti, because I think there's another enabling space that are needed to unlock finance, and that's in the policy space. And so my question for you is, what policy or fiscal reforms, including perhaps I know I'm getting these words on repurposing or addressing harmful subsidies, can help governments to create the enabling environment to unlock the kind of climate finance that we need.
Thank you, Doreen. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me add to what we heard today, a simple truth. How government spends defines how food systems adapt. Public finances doesn't just fund agriculture programs. It shapes the direction of entire systems. When it is misaligned, it throws off everything, from private investment flows to how farmers even plan their next session. So if we want private capital to flow towards resilience, or if we want climate action to reach the smallholder in dry lands and deltas, then public investment must speak the language of transformation, not distortion. And here I come about subsidies. In the Arab region, like much of the global South, public agriculture support still leans heavily towards unsustainable models. Over 80% of subsidies goes into supports and goes into input supports, raw materials, and price mechanisms that favor water-intensive crops, fossil fuel use, and short-term productivity at the expense of long-term resilience. These mechanisms are not just inefficient mechanisms, they are unaffordable in today's climate reality. Repurposing subsidies towards resilience is the first step. And here we're getting into, it's not about we want to spend more, it's about spending smarter and with purpose. This means redirecting spending to climate smart crops and regenerative practices. It also means to expand digital agriculture and early weather warning systems. And most importantly, to strengthen the safety nets for small farmers, especially women, through insurance and inclusive finance. But also we need to go further than that. We need to have governments institutionalize climate alignment in their public investment systems. This involves climate budget tagging and reporting frameworks, so ministries can measure and steer public funds. It also means to embed climate risk analysis and adaptation metrics in the design and approval of public investment projects. And also creating a whole of government coordination linking agriculture, environment, finance, and planning ministries to ensure coherence between NDCs, food strategies, and fiscal policies. Second, we need to unlock and blend capital at scale. We just heard some of these examples. Governments can play a catalytic role by establishing national food climate investment platforms that pool public, private, and concessional finance. Funded finance tools like guarantees, first loss capital, or concessional loans to de-risk investments in climate smart value chains. And also issuance, as we're seeing now, innovative financial instruments like green and sustainability bonds with proceeds earmarked for food system adaptation, water access, and rural energy. Third and most important, we're seeing also regarding carbon pricing, also plays a very strategic role, whether through carbon taxes or emissions trading systems. Carbon pricing can discourage harmful practices, can generate revenue that funds rural transformation, and links small farmers to voluntary carbon markets, creating new income streams for sustainable practices. At ASQA, we are working with countries to explore these fiscal tools while building the analytic and institutional capacity to govern them fairly. But let us be clear, none of this is visible and viable with us. And as all of you know, many governments in our region and in the global south are constrained by debt and declining revenues. That's why we urgently need climate and food-linked debt swaps, which free up resources for adaptation and social protection. Also, we need access, we just heard also from Ruth, to long-term concessional financing, not just for projects, but for deep structural reforms. and stronger engagement from IFIs and multilateral banks to support country-owned investment plans, not fragmented projects, pipelines, as the Minister of Brazil just was mentioning. Finally, we must invest in data and accountability. We cannot manage what we don't measure. Governments need tools to monitor the climate impact of their spending and to track whether investments are reaching those most at risk, particularly small farm holders in fragile and. Let me close by saying this: aligning public investments with climate goals, as also the Minister of Brazil just mentioned, is not a technical fix. It is a political signal. And it's a signal that says our food systems will not be left behind in the climate transition. It's a signal that empowers farmers, attracts investors, and builds trust. And it's also a signal that makes resilience, not risk, the default setting for development. And thank you.
Thank you. Lots of practical examples in there too. We can applause at any time you'd like to. But something you said really struck me was spending smarter and with purpose. And I think that's a big part of the challenge. So Philip, how do we meet that challenge with public finance? How do we spend smarter and better to make food systems more climate resilient? And, you know, we have all these targets about unlocking domestic, private, other countries, but we're not there yet. So what can we do to get there?
Thanks. And it's a pleasure to be here. And thanks, Rola Dashti, for this very good, actually, input, which covers lots of ground. A German, but certainly also much broader perspective on this, really, for sure, is ODA needs to be catalytic, strategic, inclusive. ODA is limited. We need much more, for sure. What does it mean, strategic? It's for sure align it clearly to climate, biodiversity, and food security goals, cover let's say, the global agendas. And we heard from Ruth how we have to bring it together much better. Unlock private finance, innovation, but also unlock domestic resource mobilization. Much of it we've just heard from Rola. And finally, also inclusive. Really look at who should be the beneficiaries, who should be those who work with the money and make the best out of it, smallholder farmers, but again, private sector, and so on. Now, maybe 3 points where we see specific need to engage more. First of all, when it comes to private sector and the financial sector as well, scaling blended finance to de-risk private investment. Maybe a good example is what we've been doing also together with Cameroon in recent months and years. Actually, not only Germany, Norway, others. We are working very strongly on the Congo, a joint strategic goal of all of us, African countries, but also the world, actually, because we need them. And the Central African Forest Initiative actually agreed with Cameroon, and Cameroon agreed with the Central African Forest Initiative really to massively scale up finance for forests. Now, it's not only for forests, actually, it's about the drivers of deforestation. And there, the agri-food system comes in very strongly with cacao, coffee, and other value chains. Actually, we agreed in Hamburg a few months ago, and we co-signed it between Cameroon, UK, and Germany, representing CAFI there. A $2.5 billion deal, including the private sector, the finance institutions, including for sure ODA and CAFI itself. Lots of this funding really is also coming from Cameroon directly with their agricultural and let's say funding scheme. So this is a good example to be replicated and to be implemented for sure. This is a pledge We have done many pledges. We have to do it now. So, but this is a good example. Secondly, mobilize really development banks. Also, let's say the national development banks, refocus them also on agriculture issues. There's the IFAD Agri Development Bank platform. We are supporting actually as well. But there can also be, when it comes really to mobilizing the private sector, can also be pre-arranged financing concepts or arrangements, which is climate risk finance insurance. How can you get in the insurance sector really to be part of agricultural insurance, harvest insurances, climate risk insurances? Again, there you need to specifically use also ODA or grants to mobilize smallholder farmers to co-fund premiums and to get them into a more formal system of insurance questions when it comes to food security. So this is one. Secondly, really, I would just quickly echo harmful subsidies, domestic resource mobilization, fair tax systems, illicit financial flows. $90 billion flow out of Africa every year, much more than ODA flows in. We need to work with ODA money, with our joint programs that can mobilize much more domestic action. This is a very good thing. Only if there's strong domestic action, the agenda can be successful. So we need to be catalytic in that sense. And finally, let me just say a few words on, as a third point, on ecosystem services, payments for ecosystem services and carbon markets. We should not be over-enthusiastic. We should not over-promise, but we should look very clearly what are the options. And it's very country and sector specific. There's absolutely no one-size-fits-all solution. But we need to be ready to really leverage this market and get into a better understanding how to what we need, which is climate biodiversity globally. So also CAFI is looking for a payment for the Central African for environmental systems scheme. There's the compensation initiative, which really looks at agri-food systems and how environmental benefits can be served there. And we want to strengthen it and scale it up in the future. So thanks a lot. These might be a few points which can help the discussion.
Thank you. And thank you so much for bringing up the point of don't be I forgot the words used, but overcome it, the nuance that's needed to unlock some of the different kinds of finance. So you've touched on some of the private, but spoke mostly about public, but I'm going to turn to Peter here because we've heard a little bit about blended finance. We've heard about, I don't think that the markets quite yet, but how do we, from the business perspective, how can innovative climate finance really finance the action that we need?
Cool, thank you.
Gracias. Yo sé que es el final de la tarde de una cumbre y un día bastante largo. Yo creo que tenemos que cambiar entonces el enfoque aquí. Cuando hablamos de fondos climáticos, hablamos de que es de moverlos de un sistema a un sistema mejor y cómo pagamos entonces esa travesía. Pero a usted se le está olvidando un punto importante, que son los riesgos físicos de las cadenas de suministro. Por esto quiero decir lo siguiente, le voy a dar un ejemplo. Es un ejemplo real, es decir, es un asesor del mundo real. Una compañía de bebidas de 12.000 millones, es decir, que tiene 1.5 mil millones de ganancia. Ellos están presentes en el mundo donde pues cultivan para hacer sus bebidas alcohólicas, pero sus modelos climáticos, modelos de todo tipo. Entonces, todos se corrieron. El escenario base que escogieron para esta compañía es que de aquí a 5 años, 1.5 mil millones de dólares se va a reducir a cero como resultado de la reducción de los riesgos físicos en la cadena de suministro. Entonces, no se trata de un sentido moral. Esta conversación pasó a resiliencia y por eso es que los negocios están aquí y por eso es que los negocios están tan abiertos a ver cuáles son las soluciones que están disponibles. Y si ustedes ven el sistema de la agroindustria y la agricultura regenerativa, es una de las principales soluciones que tenemos a la mano. Entonces tengo 3 puntos que señalar. Uno, tenemos que ir más allá de los proyectos pilotos. Hemos admirado estos proyectos durante mucho tiempo. Tenemos que aumentar la escala. Segundo, tenemos que tener rendición de cuentas. Entonces, los negocios no tienen temor de rendir cuentas. Ellos reportan sus cifras trimestralmente y están abiertos, pero hay un problema fundamental en los mercados financieros, es que solamente les interesan los resultados financieros en ganancias, en flujo de caja. Los resultados ambientales o sociales no son parte de la conversación. Aquí es donde viene la parte contable. Nosotros no necesitamos el punto que incluso un marco contable adicional ya se ha discutido aquí y también en muchísimos otros foros. Necesitamos trabajar hacia estándares globales. Tenemos ISSB, tenemos el CIS, muchas plataformas para centrar esta conversación. También necesitamos varias métricas nuevas. Tenemos que repensar la forma en cómo nosotros unimos la parte financiera a esta conversación. Esto sería a través de misiones específicas. Se discutió en Japón, el G7 apoyó esto y ahora son reglas para evitar las emisiones. Si tenemos soluciones que tienen el potencial de reducir emisiones en el futuro, podemos capturarlas en las reglas para evitar emisiones y eso les permite a ustedes para comparar proyectos, compañías y productos con soluciones de igual a igual que tienen más potencial para reducir las emisiones. Y ahí es donde los flujos financieros tienen que acudir. Y lo último que tenemos que hacer en la parte financiera es que tenemos que tener mayores destrezas. Hemos oído esta semana el grupo eh, de empresas. Tenemos casos de la vida real. Uno de esos casos es cómo podemos tener entonces que esa agricultura regenerativa se aumente. Tenemos que tener 8.000 millones para hacer el cerrado y que sea entonces un área regenerativa. O sea que la escala de financiación va a ser necesitan financiamiento mixto, financiamiento directo, pero una cosa que no puedo resolver, pero me imagino que tanta gente inteligente en esta sala, si lo pueden hacer, es tener, sí como no, es fácil tener una conversación de proyecto o una conversación financiera, pero es imposible llevar ese financiamiento a los pequeños agricultores hasta el presente, que son justamente los que tienen que beneficiar de esos cambios. Sí. Voy a cambiar esta perspectiva. Le voy a pedir. Ahora vamos a oír las opiniones de todos. Deberíamos estar haciendo aquí ahora, que para que ustedes participan también. ¿Cuál sería? Una sola cosa, una cosa diferente que nosotros tenemos que hacer, que podría cambiar todo el juego, desbloquear la financiación o generar toda la que necesitamos, que sería esa sola cosa. Para mí, implementar esa contabilidad de las emisiones. Sencillamente ver exactamente cómo se puede lograr esa reducción. Compromiso político y regulaciones correctas para la transformación. Yo diría gobernanzas, sistemas nacionales y gobiernos democráticos que tengan a las personas enfrente. Gracias. Bueno, iría hacia el pico del sistema. Todavía no estamos listos en cuanto a la contabilidad de los activos naturales y también no sabemos cuánto nos costará las relaciones con esos activos naturales. Es decir, tenemos que buscar una manera para proteger los recursos básicos que generan nuestra economía. Y si quieren una gran cosa que hacer, podría ser, tenemos, y es lo que tendríamos que presionar para que se logre. Todavía no tenemos nada específico que le asigne un valor económico a los activos, a estos activos. Eso es lo que tenemos que hacer. Muchísimas gracias. Yo creo que hay
If
una
there's one
cosa
important thing that
importante
we
que tenemos que
must
hacer desde el
do
punto
from the
de
point
vista
of view of a
de un
southern
país
country,
del sur.
a
La
country of the
primera
global south,
cosa
thing is to say that funding should not come from
por supuesto, el
donations.
financiamiento.
For that, we would
Tenemos que
need to
tener
have
otros
other
argumentos para
arguments to leverage during
negociar.
negotiations. These arguments
Y
could
estos argumentos
come
pueden
from a
salir de una
better
mejor
counting of our
contabilidad de
natural
nuestros
capital.
recursos naturales. Si nosotros invertimos
We
en esta
manage to
contabilidad, es decir, si podemos
count
idear
this
métodos
with
que podamos
valid
comparar
methods,
con métodos
then
adecuados,
we
podemos
will
tener sobre
have
la
better
mesa todos los
arguments
argumentos
on the negotiating
necesarios. Y
table.
para eso, la segunda
To this
cosa
end, the would be
sería
to ensure that the
eh,
local private market has a voice.
Great, thank you all. So now we have a little bit of time. So I will take any comments, interventions, questions from the floor. Is there any? You'll just have to physically raise. Do you? Online. I see one back there. And please, and one here. So please introduce yourself and please, if you could try and make your intervention within 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers and also for the very interesting information that we have heard and some concrete recommendations. My name is Irish Bagilat. I am from the Asian Farmers Association, a regional farmer network in Asia. We have 24 members who are National Farmers Federation and cooperatives in 16 countries. So yes, we've heard 0.8 or less than % of the climate finance are actually being received by our constituencies, the small scale farmers, fishers, pastoralists, and herders. And yeah, that's ironic because if we look at the amount of food being produced by smallholder farmers and the grace to actually adopt and at the same time transition to a more sustainable food system. So we also, as a farmers organization, tried to consolidate our capacity, and we tried to also partner with other regional farmers organization in other parts of the world to be able to show that we are credible partners in actually allowing climate finance to reach our constituencies. And we have formed this platform, the Family Farmers for Climate Action, composed of about 7. But of course, we know that there are a lot of barriers for us to access climate finance at the moment. And we have been talking in the past few days, the need to really transform the climate landscape. So as a collective of regional farmers organization, I would like to get what's your concrete
as farmers organization and cooperatives. Cooperatives are business entities that provide services like insurances. What's your recommendation for us to be able to actually access what is available out there for climate financing to help us transition and contribute to the transformation we are talking about? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take the other two questions and then we'll let the panel respond.
Hello, can you hear me now? Great. Thank you so much for the speakers. This is Yirgalem from Addis Ababa University, Ethiopia. I just wanted to make a recall to the climate financing commitment made by governments. And the question is, where are we now in terms of committing or delivering that commitment, particularly in order to address the food system transformation in least developing countries like Ethiopia. The other question is, I think the commitment from the private sector or the engagement from the private sector is still limited in terms of financing climate actions. It could be because of different reasons. And what is the level of engagement of the private sector, specifically in addressing climate challenge through climate financing? Thanks so much.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you very much. My name is Janine Cooper, and I am the Special Envoy for Liberia. I think I wanted to talk about something that was mentioned here, I think by Ruth, I think that's her name, the lady next to Doreen, I can't read that far. That nothing is linking our macroeconomic context to the climate financing and the kinds of things that we're talking about. I'll give the example of Liberia. West Africa's most important biodiversity hotspot, so diversity. West Africa, 47 to 48% of the Upper Guinea forest is in our country. We have the natural resources, we have the natural capital assets, and we are not managing in any meaningful way or significant way to access climate finance. Many of the reasons are because of things like the wealth accounting and valuation of ecosystem services to repay us for the valuable service we have of maintaining over centuries the third or fourth lung of the world in West Africa has not applied to Liberia, although it has been in existence with the World Bank and UNDP since 2008. Now there's a new one, the guidelines on avoided emissions. Thousands of pilots on that. What will it take for us to overcome that bias? It's hard to believe from our perspective that it is not an intentional bias, because we are partners with all of the people who write the rules and the guidelines, and yet we have not managed to benefit from our ecosystem services that we have provided and continue to provide and will continue to provide. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to let each of our panel members respond. You can respond to all of the questions, one of the questions, or you can respond to a thought that popped into your mind before we wrap up. I will actually start over here with Dr. Choa.
Thank you once again. Maybe on what has just been said from Liberia, I believe the issue of really taking into account the natural asset and ecosystemic services is really important. Why don't we at the level of Africa organize ourselves And instead of going country by country, making sure that we are together and develop a sort of framework in which will enable us to really move forward. I believe it's a very important step. And coming now to the legal framework enabling private sector to engage from Ethiopia, our experience is that when you have a legal framework, things are captured in legal framework. For instance, in Cameroon, private sector is part of the National Committee on Climate Agenda. And it is in this single framework that all these things are discussed and planned. Thank you very much.
I'll reply briefly to both questions. Very briefly, in response to the challenge around access for smallholder farmers, the system is just not getting it right at the moment, and I think there is an openness to try to think about how much more direct access could work in this context. I mean, all of us who are involved in the kind of climate finance landscape, I think need to be going out and talking to direct finance access mechanisms that you have found that work for you, and ask questions across all the institutions that we work on as to why those are not a bigger part of the story. So I don't want to pretend that the problem isn't as big as you're making it out to be. The only thing I can offer is that I think that there is a genuine interest in trying to find ways of reducing the enormous complex barriers between the money up here and how it actually reaches people on the ground. Some of what Philip was mentioning around payment for ecosystem services schemes that I think that we're working on with my colleague from Cameroon as well, partly in that context. And then I want to turn to the friend and colleague from Liberia, and I have to say, in a not very politically sort of nuanced way, that you have every right to be as angry as you are about you're responsible for a vast part of the world's, kind of like fundamental underpinning infrastructure, and we haven't yet come up with solutions that enable funds to be transferred for you when you are basically performing a public service in the protection of those forests. I want to stay on a hopeful note because I think it's really important at the end of a conference to do that. I do believe that conversations are now happening about this macroeconomic challenge, which should get us into a situation where financial institutions that are kind of ultimately responsible for helping to set what the cost of capital is, what your situation with debt is, what the value of your assets are, that conversation is beginning to happen that recognizes we are all dependent on resetting that framework in a way that recognizes an actual asset base. I also genuinely think that our colleagues in Brazil and the forest countries of the world are now turning around and coming up with that, which speaks to, I think, what my friend next to me said, coming up with their own solutions out of impatience for the fact that none of the ones that have been on the table have so far worked. And the one thing that I would say very much with a kind of UK and hat on and kind of thinking of my boss, our foreign minister, is that it's our job now to listen to the solutions that you bring. And there has to be a reason why we would say no, because we owe you, basically.
Yes, thanks. I think these are very good questions and there are no simple answers very clearly. And thanks, Ruth, for being also so clear. Access also for, let's say, farmers organizations. When we talk about the international funding, ODA, including climate finance for sure, with the Green Climate Fund and bilateral, and also this is, say, negotiated with governments. So there need to be national frameworks, national systems in the countries to make sure that the funds finally also flow in, for example, with farmers organizations. Multi-actor partnerships, we've had events here that were talking about it. So systems need to be created also in country to bring together the different interest groups and build actually that goal of having sustainable food systems and building it in. Not an easy question, not an easy task, but I think that's very necessary when we talk about the more public funds. And for sure, the goal is really that should not remain public to public only. Yeah, no, there's a very important role of the governments, but there's then a very important role of civil society, private sector, science to put of cooperatives and farmers organizations. Yes, and I mean, we need to work on the direct access agenda in many institutions as well. We need to bring together these different goals in country, also in our countries, in Germany, in Europe. I mean, we face the same issues for sure of bringing together systems. Thank you.
Thank you. I also would like you to leave with an optimistic note, but unfortunately, talking about the commitments of climate finance, it's unfortunate it's not there. It's not met. There's a lot of talk about climate. There is a lot of commitments, and especially from developed countries, the $100 billion commitment every year, we haven't seen it, and it's not there. That's unfortunate. Second part, but there is a lot of talk. But we still need to have the voice. And developing countries and the global south needs to keep raising the voice because it's extremely important. And talking about grant and small farmers, it's unfortunately when these commitments are made and these grants are made, it's made at the macro level, but not seeing, despite the fact that we are recognizing that the small farmers, but we don't get these funds, special types of funds and big amounts to the small farmers. So the green climate funds and all these different climate funds, it's unfortunately first it's burdensome of papers and requirements, which they need to revisit the way they function. And there needs to also be, because then we need to deal, it's like the small businesses, okay? It needs to have special vehicles. You can't have commercial banks to give small businesses because it's not their business. It's too costly for them. The same thing when we're talking about climate finance, we just not only need to have funds for the bigger mega projects, but we also need to think in parallel to have a mechanism for these small farmers. And these were the narrative and countries and the discussion should be done. It's not only thinking about the big picture, but in parallel, which we are not seeing, but there has to be the voice going on as we go along. And the third, and I think what Liberia is talking about is extremely important. When you price the cost of environment on these types of investments, and when huge investments are coming to the country, there is a price for also the environment. Start pricing it, then you will be having avoidance emission projects a lot. In the absence of this pricing, this emission cost and the destruction of environment, you always will be seeing abuses, and we're not going to go into, and then we'll have this problem of the planet and the countries. So it's government regulations, it becomes a very big, important issues. Thank you.
So we need to get pragmatic about carbon markets. It's super simple. We can't fix climate without carbon markets. What the UK, Kenya, and Singapore have launched recently is amazing. That needs to be scaled up. That will pay for services. That will also pay farmers for the carbon they sequester through their regen ag practices. But we know that the first few years of a farmer changing their practices, they will need funding. And that's an unlock which we haven't found yet. Private long-term offtake agreements is one, recognition of those carbon credits in their payment, but that's not going to cover it all.
Thank you all. So I also am an optimist, but I am also a realist. And we've gone over, and there's no way I can summarize the conversation we've had. That's the reason. in me. But I just want to say thank you to the panel, to the participants, to those of you who have been online for this rich discussion. I know it's a low energy part of the event, but we managed to bring some energy and good ideas into it. And again, collectively, we will continue to move together. So thank you very much.